And thanks so much for everyone who's attending today. Can you hear me all right? Yeah. Brilliant. So for those who might not be aware, one of the things senior management like to hide behind, they do a couple of things. They talk about the banks that they've got a terrible loan deal with, that they've got this restructured debt with, and it's all to do with them. Sometimes they talk about council. Now, even though the executive board is the direct employer, council are the top governing body of Goldsmiths, and they were the body that decided on Wednesday, the 25th of March, that future Goldsmiths was the only way to save the institution, even though we can see that it's the third time in 5 years where they're going to sack staff, try and restructure again after the first aborted one and the second attempt to get it right, and it will tank the institution. Because who would want to study at a place that's gone through 3 rounds of such chaos in 5 years? What kind of working processes even function at that time? This council meeting on the Wednesday 25th, as I said, announced this newest round of cuts and restructuring, which this is despite the fact 16.1 million was saved during the transformation programme. That's the second round 2 years ago. Where did that money go? This is despite David Oswald admitting in the briefing for staff who were just put at risk of redundancy or in scope of redundancy when the consultation period started on Thursday, I think the 23rd of April, that Goldsmiths has maintained around 1,300 FTE of staff, despite the 300 plus staff forced out during those redundancies. How has that happened? We've got some answers about that, we think, but to come back to the council meeting, they were due to meet today on campus 3 to 6 p.m. And because of Free Goldsmiths and this rally called today, last night they said, oh, don't worry, it's only online, we're not going to come in. That is how little the people who, thank you, that is how little the people who make these decisions that impact your lives and ours care about staff and students. They don't even want to be seen by you. They can't even bear to be challenged on their decisions. That they'd rather sit at home on Teams and make decisions that affect all of our lives. So first of all, that's for council. We would much rather talk to you and we'd much rather hold you accountable, but at this time, you don't even want to come on campus. Going back to financial mismanagement, something that hopefully we as a branch, Goldsmiths UCU and Free Goldsmiths have tried to articulate is the problem at Goldsmiths is twofold. Of course, we all understand the crisis in the sector and need for a publicly funded education system. And the fact that we have a system built on student debt, which is being devalued by inflation and more restrictive and punitive terms for students when they graduate in terms of the repayment, management can't get out of jail for that, or they can't get off the hook for that. That does not alone explain all of Goldsmiths' problems. As an FOI that came out on the last day of the spring term showed, over 16 million has been spent since 2019 on consultants, recruitment agencies, lawyers to defend themselves. And as we said earlier, where did the 1 million go that was saved during the transformation programme? We believe, GUC and Free Goldsmiths, that in addition to the crisis in the sector, the other side of that coin, it produces, the marketisation of the sector produces this financial mismanagement, which effectively siphons off student debt into privateers, into the hands of consultants, recruitment companies, and other interested parties. And it is this management team, in its various different iterations, because the only one who's been here the whole time through all 3 of these redundancy programmes is David Oswell, now with a top job, now the interim Vice-Chancellor. It is those senior management members of successive teams that have presided over this crisis, and they think by cutting more, we're somehow going to get out of it. But obviously doing the same thing again and again and hoping for a different outcome is silly business. So, what has happened now is, as they told us in a meeting several weeks ago, our action, I'm talking about the marking assessment boycott launched by GUCU in response to these cuts, was premature. They were like, what are you doing? You don't have that many members in professional services staff. Why do you care so much? Because they do not understand what we understand, you understand, what Free Goldsmiths understands, and Goldsmiths UC and Goldsmiths Unison. That this is one campus of one workforce and a community and students as well. And that an attack on any of us, you'll have to go through us all, basically. And so what they thought would happen hasn't transpired. We've come together. Students have organised autonomously, have occupied a building, won certain concessions already out of management. We have undertaken a marking assessment boycott, and we have a year-long mandate for industrial action, which is a change new for this year because of the Employment Rights Act 2025. In response to this, which just proves how much this action is successful, as Luca said earlier, students were threatened with disciplinary action, and we are now facing 100% deductions of our pay for not doing one part of our job which might be 10%, 15% of our workload. Surely this reveals only one thing, that tactic is effective, that a marking and assessment boycott works and they're afraid of it. And the only tactic they have left in response is to try to take so much of our pay that we cannot continue with the action. But we have enough money now in our hardship fund, as well as the additional support from the Fighting Fund International, to cover all deductions we believe for this first month coming in June. And we have more time to continue to fundraise for further deductions in July. They cannot kick this can down the road forever. If they cannot break us, they will soon realise the impact of this action and have to reckon with it. Now, in some ways that feels quite frustrating when we don't have an immediate lever to pull on, but our branch has made a democratic decision to defend itself from this lockout, which is what this is. 100% deductions for not doing one part of your job effectively means don't come. That's what David Oswald said, don't come to work. Don't do anything. Even though we said if you go to that and we're locked out, it will tank the institution. I'm not going to do any more admissions work. Neither is anyone else here that's doing the math. It's so cruel that they're doing this, but it reveals they are scared, have no other levers to pull on themselves, and would rather, in the short term, damage the institution because these ideologically driven cuts are the only answers they have left to the crisis in the sector. But there are other ways out of this, and they can work with us. They have never evidenced why 22 million is a sufficient savings target for this third round of restructures and redundancies. They have never given an accurate account for that, even though the operating budgetary deficit at the moment is somewhere in the region of 11 or so million. So why the extra money, right? Anyway, so we're going to carry on with the MAB, and we will escalate at a time in the near future to an indefinite strike to defend ourselves. At any point, management can say, let's come back to the table, we rescind the threat of 100% redundancies, and we potentially would offer that we would come back off strike. But in the meantime, we are continuing with the MAB, we are continuing to resist every aspect of this, and if we stand together now, hold the line, support each other, organise together as campus trade unions and students, they are going to have to reckon with us sometime soon. They have no other threats against us. All they can do is this, all they can do is take our pay, and if we support each other, we will be in a different situation at some point in the future. They will have to come back to the table. And so all I say now is, let's stand together, let's support each other, and continue to articulate a different reality, a different vision, not just for higher education in the UK broadly, but what the Goldsmiths could be. Because what happened in the occupation, what exists in those spaces, in the spaces we have in the weekly all-staff meetings, that is Goldsmiths as we know it. That is an institution that we can all believe in. What these people try and create, what happens in their minds, in their meetings, in their six-figure salary, paid for kind of whatever group think spaces where nothing ever gets done, they just keep busy by meeting each other all the time. They don't have a sense of this. They are running the institution around because they don't know what makes Goldsmiths what it is, and we do. So let's stand together, support each other, continue this fight. Solidarity, everyone. Thank you.